Hello, everyone. My name is Samantha. Thanks for tuning in to this Cloud Nonstop webinar on cloud migration strategies. It will run for about 40 minutes, and our presenter today will be Tony Vinayak, who is VP of Consulting at Cloud Nonstop. A little bit about Tony. He has been in the software industry for over 20 years with a wide variety of experiences in software tools and infrastructure space. Tony is also a certified AWS solution architect and has led several cloud and DevOps deployments over the years. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the questions panel, and Tony will try answering as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. At this point, I'll turn it over to Tony.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you here for the next about half hour or so. For the ones tuned in live, as well as the ones who may be watching this as a recording later on. A brief introduction about who we are as a company. We've been around for some 5 years. We are part of a bigger company known as Progressive Infotech, which has been around for some 20 odd years. Worldwide, we are about 1,200 employees. Collectively, we have done, more than 100 cloud deployments. We pride ourselves with our fleet of certified cloud consultants. So they are the ones who are certified in AWS and Azure. We have a 24/7 monitoring facility that is manned by about 30 people to keep an eye on deployments for our customers on-prem as well as in the cloud. Although moving forward, it is more and more of those deployments being in the cloud. And we also enjoy advanced levels of partnerships with major cloud providers like Amazon, Microsoft, as well as Google. In fact, we are a certified managed services provider with both Amazon and with Microsoft. So in terms of the agenda for this webinar, so we're going to talk about the drivers for the cloud migration, and some of those perhaps you may find even surprising. I know that I was when we had a look at the survey results. Then talk about some of the more pragmatic migration strategies that we have deployed while working with our customers, and then also what we have learned, from those migrations, and share with you some of those lessons that we have picked up from the field. All right. In terms of a market survey, so this is based upon surveying about 1,000 companies here in the U.S. and the drivers for the cloud migration, cost being the most significant one. About 23% of the companies they mentioned about the cost being the major driver. Does not come as a surprise. In fact, even if you were to be migrating your server as is to the cloud, that alone could give you, cost benefits. But surprisingly, security and compliance. So usually over the years, cloud has been associated with the paranoia of not being secure or a lack of privacy, but the fact remains that when you look at declarations and assertions from major cloud vendors like AWS and Azure, they have gone to great lengths to ensure data security, encryption, privacy, adherence to industry standards and compliances like HIPAA compliance and PCI. So I guess it's actually come to a stage where now companies are finding it even more secure and comfortable to put their data in the cloud. So that's an interesting trend. Basically, just indicates a maturity of the cloud platform and greater adoption of the cloud platform. Not to say that certain industries and certain companies they're still apprehensive. Perhaps they have good reasons to be so, but definitely it's a greater adoption moving forward. Some of the other drivers are perhaps more obvious, like high availability. So cloud, from the ground up have been built to be resilient and redundancy in terms of multiple availability zone and some of these built-in features like database clustering that makes it easier for implementing your business continuity in the cloud. So anyway, so there you have it. So this probably gives you a good idea of what are some of the major drivers for cloud migrations, and not surprisingly, cost being top of the heap. Um, in terms of migration plans, so when we surveyed the companies, what are their plans for cloud adoption, or in general, extending that to private cloud, bare metal, VMs. So some of the trends are, pretty unmistakable. So the blue bars, for example, so when you just have a look at those, is the one for, private cloud, and that's on the up. So today, about 28% of the companies already have plans for migrating to the, sorry, I should be saying public cloud, migrating to the public cloud. So that's a unmistakable trend moving forward. Adoption for private cloud is also on the up, but perhaps it's a discussion for another day. Public cloud versus private cloud. We see a lot more adoption for public cloud, as compared to private cloud. Although I'm sure there are some good use cases where private cloud makes better sense. Um, a trend for bare metal is sloping downwards, which should not come as a surprise. As well as you notice that virtual machines, and those of us who've been around for a long time, so we've all seen VMs gaining in popularity over the years, but now just running VMs on their own, on-prem. So that's the trend which is coming down and giving way to public cloud and computing. And I mean, even though obviously you would still be running VMs in the cloud, but running VMs on their own, on-prem or private data centers. So that's on the way down. So note that cloud migration is without its own challenges, and this is where companies like us, we help our customers and businesses who are looking to adopt cloud and move to the cloud. Minimizing downtime is paramount. Moving your infrastructure, the platform in a production system, is kind of like changing tires on a moving bus. It's not easy, and while minimizing the downtime, so you have to be plotting some strategies of how you could be doing that migration, and minimizing the downtime, maybe define a cutover time period and replicate the data over from one system to the other. So that's something that needs to be planned out and thought through rather carefully. And we've done that several times with our customers. Staying within budget, and that's all the more important for the larger migrations where some of our customers, when they're migrating their entire data center, so we are talking of hundreds, if not thousands of nodes that are being migrated onto the cloud, and the applications that go along with it, and all other adjustments that need to be made to the workflows, and so on and so forth. So it does require careful project planning and execution, and staying within budget is something which becomes rather critical when you're doing cloud migrations. I know all of this sounds pretty scary, but so that's why probably it's good to be doing the migrations with a partner who's actually been there, done that, and helped companies to go through those kind of migration steps. And other than that, you also notice several other factors like minimizing data loss, so which goes back to the earlier comment about running two systems in parallel for a while, and then within a window of downtime, making sure that all the data is being migrated from the old system to the new system. And luckily, technical challenges and feasibility, so that is low as a challenge, and that again talks about the maturity of the technology. And cloud has been around for a while, and so usually that doesn't really pose as much of a challenge for companies. Right. So in terms of cloud migration strategies, usually step one would be for us to get together with our customer and lay out the migration roadmap. And we do have a bit of a recipe that we have evolved, but each and every customer is unique and somewhat different. So it makes perfect sense for us to tweak it, customize it, as necessary while working with each and every customer, and and then get them on the cloud, and then followed by some of the additional steps like progressing onto building cloud native applications and engaging a cloud MSP for ongoing monitoring and maintenance and upkeep of the cloud infrastructure, and then ultimately getting to a stage where you are a lot more nimble when it comes to adopting the DevOps principle, because cloud really lends itself to DevOps, and we will talk a bit more about that a little later on in the presentation. So first and foremost, it's all about plotting a migration roadmap with the businesses. And step one, of course, would be the assessment phase. What are the costs associated? What is the ROI? And a high-level architecture and how the existing architecture translates to the architecture in the cloud. Would that architecture migrate as is, or should there be some refitting or refactoring of the architecture as part of that migration? And again, the objective is to do it on a piecemeal basis. So maybe start with the proof of concept and select the certain applications or build a pilot, and then bring that into the cloud and observe and learn, and then repeat. So taking small steps, baby steps to begin with, followed by migrating data, migrating applications, and then once you get more and more comfortable with the cloud, so that's where you think in terms of leveraging some of the additional facilities that are made available by the cloud framework, like auto scaling and elasticity and high availability and so on and so forth. In fact, one of the trend that we have seen is the initial adoption of the cloud is more to benefit from cloud as an infrastructure as a service. As you would know, so on the cloud you have infrastructure as a service available, as well as you have a platform as a service framework that is also available. And then lately there are some newer developments happening in terms of function as a service. So what we have seen is initial adoption is more for just to benefit from infrastructure as a service, essentially outsourcing the infrastructure layer without having to worrying about maintaining it on-prem, and rather than that, benefiting from its availability in the cloud. And then finally, then we talk about the optimization phase, where benefiting from the advanced features of the cloud. In fact, Gartner has also proposed what they're calling as the 5 R's when it comes to cloud migration strategies, and they work perfectly hand in hand with what we've seen and what we've also been advising our customers. So the rehost could be as simple as a lift and shift, or a forklift, as AWS also calls it, which is essentially redeploying your servers in the cloud as is. So all the software on the servers, the way you have it running, either on bare metal or in a VM, so you're rehosting it on the cloud, and benefiting from the ease of instantiating these servers and bringing them up, bringing them down, scaling them out, and load balancing across them. So all the built-in features of the cloud, so you start benefiting from that. And we've seen that just a merely rehosting alone can result in some 30% cost savings. So that's a great motivator to begin with. So that could be an approach. The other approach could be what Gartner is calling as a revise, which is essentially it's kind of like lift and shift, but along the way you're also benefiting from some of the more advanced features that are available in the cloud, in addition to infrastructure as a service. For example, you might be moving your application and all the servers to the cloud, but deciding to use the cloud-based managed databases like Amazon Aurora, or DynamoDB, or if you're migrating your analytics application, then using Redshift. So all of these managed databases and managed services, so that you benefit from their scalability and their clustering ability, so you don't have to worry about backup routines and things like such. They're all taken care of by the cloud provider for you. So that could be one approach. Refactoring is, now this is where you start getting serious about really adopting the cloud and stepping it up a couple of notches. So one of the popular frameworks when it comes to building and deploying applications in the cloud is using the microservices framework, and it's getting really popular, and basically breaking down your legacy application that might have been built as a large monoliths and breaking them down into smaller chunks. And each and every chunk is a self-contained microservice running on its own. And typically, microservices are deployed using containers. And the Docker is the more popular container technology, in the cloud. And most of the cloud providers, they provide built-in support, strong support for microservices and containers. So and we help a lot of our customers in migrating their existing applications to microservices. And hand in hand with that is also the new serverless computing framework, which was initially popularized by AWS in the form of Lambda functions. And so this is, and again, become extremely popular in the sense that if you're able to build your applications or refactor your applications as functions, there are no servers, and the functions, basically you just upload your code, and the variety of runtime that are supported if you want to be building your functions like Node.js and .NET and JavaScript and Python and so on and so forth. And all of the hosting of the applications is all taken care of. And the beauty of that architecture is that you're only paying for the invocations of those functions. If the functions are not being invoked, you're not paying anything. So it can help you to bring the costs down, while also simplifying the deployment of your applications quite a bit. So so that's another level of adopting the cloud architecture as part of your migration strategies. Or you may be looking to replace some of your legacy systems with software as a service systems like Salesforce.com as a CRM, or Workday as your HR system, or Office 365 as your office productivity system. So in that case, of course, it's a fully managed, fully hosted service, and all you have to do is be using those services and taking care of the data. So that's the maximum level of cloud adoption, and of course, extremely popular level of cloud adoption out there as well. So we sit down with our customers and lay out all the various options and look at their architecture, and then figure out what are the approaches that might be working best for them, and then put that on the roadmap. So maybe start with rehosting certain applications to begin with, and gradually work our way up to refactoring and rebuilding those applications using the newer cloud framework. A little bit more about the cloud native applications, only because so they have become fairly popular, and so it does warrant mention on its own. So like I mentioned, so it's all about migrating from your monolithic applications to microservices, which are smaller components. And conceptually, this is not something new. And so in case you're familiar with the service-oriented architecture or object-oriented programming, so it's the same concept. The only difference being that each and every microservice runs in its own separate, distinct environment. And each and every microservice can be a completely different technology stack, as long as they have a published interface, which usually is a RESTful API that you use for invoking services. So anyway, so that's part of the cloud native application architecture. And like I mentioned early on, deployment is moving from bare metal and VMs to containers. and within that, Docker is the popular container technology. And then there's another layer that goes along with the containers for orchestration. Containers, they need to be instantiated, they need to be scaled out horizontally, they need to be scaled in case there are any idling containers. So, and then networking layer needs to be set up between them. So all of that management layer is what is known as container orchestration. And and there are several software options available out there for that. For example, Amazon provides something called ECS, so like as an EC2 container services. Apache has a project called Mesos. The more popular one out there is Kubernetes. So there's several options that are also available. In terms of project management, so cloud native applications, they lend themselves to being highly agile, and they facilitate DevOps automation, which is all about streamlined application development and deployment. So just to play on words, what is Scrum Fall and Agile, you might have heard those terms. So more of that is moving into continuous delivery, and likewise the silo development processes, they're moving more towards DevOps principles, and centralized governance is giving way to decentralized autonomy. So, for example, at the recently concluded AWS reInvent at Las Vegas, when was it? Back in end of November. So Amazon, they actually mentioned that they have some 30 odd different technology stacks that are being used company wide for building their microservices. And as you may know, Amazon and some of the large companies like Amazon and Netflix, they are all in with microservices. And Amazon, they also asserted that 30 different technology stacks for building microservices, and they're perfectly okay with it. So let the business owners determine, which technology stack were the best for them for building and owning the microservices, that they're responsible for. So that's, as you can imagine, so that's a culture shift, that's a paradigm shift, but that's also, pretty much part of the cloud native applications. Excuse me, as I take a sip of water. And feel free to log any questions in the question panel for those watching the webinar live, and then I'll be happy to take those questions right at the end of the presentation. Right. So another thing that we also recommend to our customers is don't do it alone. And there's a lot involved in the cloud in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the platform. Cloud managed service providers, they can help you. So once you get onto the cloud platform, they can help you with monitoring those services for you. Even though cloud providers like AWS and Azure, they do provide a lot of tools and APIs for monitoring the operations on an ongoing basis, but still someone needs to do it. So and engaging a MSP is, and again, in line with focusing on your core competency. So just like you don't want to be hosting and maintaining the hardware and the networking and the storage, on your own. Likewise, some of the core IT operations, like monitoring of the infrastructure or maintenance and any remediation. So in case there is any slowdown that's happening in your application, so who are you going to call? So MSPs can help. And also, the pace of innovation in the cloud is absolutely breathtaking. I got myself certified just like 3 months ago as a solution architect on AWS, and believe me, I feel outdated already. And I spend a significant amount of time just trying to keep up with all the new services that keep rolling out of the AWS factory. So in fact, I know some companies that actually have it as a full-time job to keep on top of AWS and what are the latest innovations that are coming out of them, and see how that has an impact upon their own application infrastructure. So MSP can help with all of those. So they are the experts. They have the certified developers. That's their job, keeping tab of the cloud providers and keeping up with innovation. And also cloud makes it incredibly easy to make changes to the infrastructure. So but it's equally important to keep track of those changes. There has to be some change management process, to go with it. MSPs, they take care of that for you. So they will have a ticketing system, and then there'll be complete audit trail of each and every change, who requested it, who made the change, why it was made, what was the impact of the change, and so on and so forth. So all of those steps and workflows and processes that are mandated by ITIL, and so usually they are pretty good at following those. Last not the least, keeping cloud cost under check. We here at Cloud Nonstop, so we make available a tool. It's called Centalytics to our customers, and it's a fairly thorough tool that keeps tab on your billing, and also make recommendations on how you can further optimize your infrastructure, where it makes more sense to be prepaying for reserved instances. And actually, as you would know, even within reserved instances, there are so many different kinds. And it's important to stay on top of the costs, more so because now the pricing by the cloud providers is by the second, which is good and bad. Because good in the sense that as soon as you are done using a resource, you stop paying for it, right that very second. But you need to make sure that you terminate those instances if you're done using them. Otherwise, you're paying them for each and every unused second. So it's a double-edged sword. So that's where the MSP, they can help in terms of keeping track of the costs for you. And right, so like I mentioned early on, cloud and DevOps. DevOps is a lot easier on the cloud. Have a look at the DevOps tools and features that are available on AWS. For example, for continuous integration and continuous delivery, AWS, they have code pipeline, code build, code deploy, code star, and they highly simplified setting up a DevOps pipeline by using these tools. And even these tools are extensible, so you can, for example, plug in your own issue tracking tool. Let's say you're using Jira as your issue tracking, so you can plug that into this. For container orchestration, AWS provides ECS, the one that I mentioned early on. Recently, they also announced support for Kubernetes, so that's EKS. And Fargate is the new offering from AWS. I haven't really had a chance to look at it closely, but the promise is that of, again, abstracting the whole notion of container orchestration. So you don't worry about it. Fargate takes care of that for you. And beneath the layers, it can be using ECS or EKS. So that's their infrastructure as a code. For that, they provide AWS provides the CloudFormation, where you can create templates for deploying your code. They also provide ops work based around Chef. For monitoring, they provide facilities, CloudWatch, CloudTrail. For versioning, they have code commits. So there's a whole bunch of tools, and they are all integrated with the AWS framework ecosystem. And likewise, and I'm talking more about AWS only because that's my own field of familiarity. But Azure provides a lot of these kind of features as well. And so the point being that once you embrace cloud, you are fully enabled, even more than what you might be doing right now on-prem. So and DevOps, as we all know, it's all about streamlining application development, application deployment, time to market, and in an ideal world, as soon as you check in a change into your version control, it automatically goes through automated testing and deployment, and ta-da, it's in production, assuming it passed all the tests. So there are companies out there who are actually doing it. So if that's the level of automation you are striving for, then cloud is a good platform that would enable you to adopt DevOps. All right. So, what have we learned while working with our customers? Some of the lessons from the field. Usually, we've seen that what really triggers off the cloud migration project for our customers is one particular event. In a lot of cases, in some cases, a proactive company, so they just might be thinking of cloud migration anyways. There's a lot of literature around that, and there's a lot of buzz in the market around that. But a lot of times, it's out of necessity. So if there's been a severe production slowdown, and it's not easy to fix it because it's a monolithic application, and then making changes, rolling them out, making multiple changes to a large monolithic application is easier said than done, and that might be the motivation for adopting the microservices framework, and hence the move to cloud. Operational costs, we have seen that as a key driver, and we saw that early on when we looked at the survey results, so that's not a surprise. Because as we know, so just merely rehosting your server in the cloud can give you about 30% cost savings right away without making any other changes to your application. However, cost is not the primary motivator for a lot of customers. It's even more than that. It's about agility, because provisioning servers. I've actually worked with a customer, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, where we were doing some data warehousing project for them, and the project was ready to be deployed in production. It had passed the QA and the UAT, but it took another month for the production server to be provisioned. And needless to say, there were delays in the go live date for the project. So that's because everything was happening in the on-prem data center for that particular customer. Things are quite different, an order of magnitude simpler when it comes to deploying resources in the cloud. Provisioning a server or provisioning an entire application stack can be automated using infrastructure as a code templates like CloudFormation, and within minutes, you can provision a server or a cluster of server which is ready to scale up or scale down. So and that's agility, and that's really speeds up time to market. So that's one of the major motivators for companies to be embracing cloud. It does bring about cultural shifts because now we are talking of agility. We are talking of a lot easier to adopt DevOps. And DevOps is all about breaking down the silos and cross-functional teams that get together. So, and that's a whole topic of discussion on its own. And we do a lot of DevOps consulting with our customers as well, and help them to make that transition. So yeah, so cloud, it does bring about cultural shift when companies they graduate to be adopting DevOps. Selecting a cloud provider, that can be challenging because there's a myriad of options that are available out there. So should it be AWS, should it be Azure, should it be IBM, should it be Google Cloud Platform, which one? So there is no easy answer. And although these days, remember the adage that it used to be that no one can get fired for recommending IBM. So these days it seems to be no one gets fired for recommending AWS, only because that's the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, and they have you name it, they have it. But that said, other cloud providers like Azure, so they are up and coming and closing the gap quite rapidly. So yeah, so it can be challenging, and so partnering up with an MSP like us can help you in making the right selection for you. Make bite-sized moves when migrating. That's sounds pretty obvious, but don't be too ambitious when it comes to migrating from your on-prem to the cloud. And usually that's what companies they intend to do anyways. So take small steps at a time, get comfortable with the cloud before going all in. And then infrastructure as a service somehow still seems to be more popular way to adopt the cloud for the companies. Platform as a service does provide a greater degree of abstraction and higher productivity, but Infrastructure as a service is easy to understand, a lot more flexible, and easier segue from existing applications to the cloud. So that's the way things are at this point of time. How things are going to be 5 years from now, who knows? As the innovation continues. A lot of times, while we're working with companies and identifying, which are the applications that should be migrated to the cloud, well, guess what? There might be some applications that may not be good candidates for cloud migration. Because by design the data needs to be living within the four walls of the company, perhaps. So it might be better for those applications to continue to reside on-prem or in a private cloud, as long as they are able to interface, if necessary, with what's in the public cloud. So this is a slide that I picked up from Microsoft website. So there they have given an example of how they would support a hybrid cloud environment consisting of running Windows Azure Pack and Hyper-V virtual machines in a private cloud environment, while also running workloads in the public cloud as well. So yeah, private cloud, public cloud, or hybrid cloud. So we have seen some companies taking that route, and we can help with that planning and implementation as well. And the other trend in the industry is in a multi-cloud strategy. So, and this probably applies more for the larger enterprises where they do not want to put all their eggs in one basket. So, to avoid any vendor lock-in, or maybe to keep their vendors on their toes by engendering healthy competition between them. So if you have different applications, two separate applications with very little dependencies between them, so you could, possibly deploy them on one on AWS and one on Azure. So nothing stopping you from doing that. So and we have worked with our customers to think through that sort of a strategy as well. Although it does add complexity, as you would imagine, because now we have multiple frameworks, and then every time you want to deploy an application, you have to make a choice, which cloud you want to deploy it on. And then as much as possible, you want to be choosing cloud agnostic tooling. So for example, if you're developing microservices on containers, so you want to make sure that the container technology that you adopt is portable across multiple clouds. And actually, that's one of the strengths of container technology anyways. It makes it a lot easier for you to deploy your applications on a variety of platforms. So multi-cloud strategy. Some companies, they are very, very aware of that. And although we have also seen a lot of other companies who are all in on Azure or all in on AWS, because that's a strategy that works the best for them. So no right one answer as such. So I see that we are almost out of time, and I think we did well in terms of the time. And at this time, let me see if there are any questions out there. I might have time for a couple of questions. Let me have a look at the question panel. There's a question from Al Inman. What proportion of companies that have moved to the cloud have adopted microservices framework? Now that's a good question, Al, and I would say still early days at the moment for the microservices, only because even though component-based development has been around for a long time, the enabling technologies for microservices like containers and container orchestration and the APIs, and one more thing I forgot to mention early on is the pattern for API gateways. So that's still probably a couple of years old and evolving, but the more progressive companies have adopted it. Majority of the companies, they have not. So they're still probably running the more traditional three-tier application, the web apps and a presentation layer and server applications and a database layer. So that's how most of the world is. But moving forward, we do see an increasing trend of microservices adoption. Another question from Laura Whitney. Have you seen any use cases where companies did not find it cost effective to move to the cloud? Funny you asked that, Laura. Believe it or not, I actually did come across one company. They are a video games company. They have like 3,000 nodes running in their own data center, and all that those machines are doing is video rendering and working full time. So there isn't any issues with capacity utilization, and they've been doing it for a few years already. So for them to migrate to the cloud would not really buy them, much in terms of the cost. In fact, it might even be more expensive for them. But that's a rather unique use case, that I have seen. Most of the time, I would say, it makes the ROI argument for moving to the cloud is it's pretty significant. So, but yeah, there might be some exceptions out there as well. Akash asks, we are moving towards DevOps, but have not moved to the cloud yet. We are thinking of moving to the cloud in the coming months. Would you recommend that we defer our DevOps automation till we have moved to the cloud? Well, it all depends upon your timeframes, Akash. If you are, and it really depends upon your business requirements. I wish I had a better answer for you. But I guess, one way to look at that is, so if you are going down the route of DevOps automation already, then look for those tools that could be portable to the cloud as well. So as and when you make your migration to the cloud, so it could become part of your cloud migration strategy. But I'm glad to hear, though, that you already are adopting the DevOps automation, even though you haven't moved to the cloud. So obviously, DevOps and cloud, they are definitely not mutually exclusive. They are not exclusive. They don't have to go hand in hand. And DevOps has been around for a while. So I guess the best way to look at that would be to make sure that the tooling that you're using is something that you will be able to carry with to the cloud, as and when you make that move. I think we have time for one more question maybe. Manny Rodriguez asks, which cloud do you recommend more, AWS or Azure? So like I was mentioning early on, so there is no easy answer, when it comes to cloud adoption. We are partners with both AWS and Azure. So we are agnostic when it comes to, which cloud. So it all really depends upon the customer requirements. Historically, so far, yes, we have definitely recommended AWS a lot more than Azure, but we do see an upward trend, uptake in the adoption of AWS, and especially in the enterprise companies who have been a Microsoft shop, all these years. So they might be more tempted, and I'm sure Microsoft is working doubly hard to retain those customers and help them and entice them to move to Azure rather than running their Windows workloads on AWS. All right, I guess that's all the time we have, I'm afraid. So thank you very much for those of you who tuned in. And in case you are watching this as a recording and you have any questions for us, feel free to email us at solutions@cloudnonstop.com. And thank you very much for your time again.